companies often deviate. They spend a lot of time planning when they're going to buy a company, but then once the company is in their hands, plans change and so forth. So, just out of curiosity, what happens after the purchase that gives these companies cold feet or shift priorities and so forth?
I think many things could happen once a transaction is completed. Obviously, the management is fully aware of what needs to be done, replace, transition. Typically, you have a plan that is quite good, I would say, if things were done correctly. But once the transaction is done, obviously the is just the beginning of a longer journey. So things can happen over time where you thought that a good example, you thought that it was really the best thing to do was to merge your ERP with the corporation you just purchased. And once you find out the complexity or other issues may come out from a licensing perspective and so on, and there might be afterthoughts that certain part of the integration could be delayed or could be done differently. Because let's face it, during the due diligence, not every options available might be looked at. The time is limited. So for any typical integration for a software, a component, you may have looked two or three alternatives, but suddenly once the transaction is complete and you have full access to the people and the systems, suddenly other options might be more attractive. So a plan our plans and plans are made to be changed when necessary and for many reasons. It could be other options coming out. It could be cost. It could be complexity. It could be strategy changing. So I think once the transaction is consumed, things could change after. It doesn't necessarily stays exactly as planned.
Still, though, since we are in the industry of digital manufacturing, obviously ERP is important to maximizing profits in the production aspect. No.
Yeah, ERP is it's the nuts and bolts. It's the fundamental. It's the foundation of the corporation. This is where you manage your inventory, you manage your purchasing, accounts payable, accounts receivable. So this is the heart, and I would say the heart and the lungs of the corporation. There's more to that. Obviously, there's a lot more into manufacturing than the ERP. Or you might be talking scheduling, PLM, digital twins. There's a lot more sophistication and components, I should say, than the ERP. But the ERP is, in essence, the back office and the heart and lungs of your operation.
Just to understand the whole picture of this. So let's just say company A is buying company B, right? So you said that there are three steps: the due diligence, the transaction consumed, and then the quote unquote day one. Giving an example, when exactly does D4N come into the picture? I'm assuming it's in day one after all of these processes have taken months, years, or what have you, depending on how large the corporation is.
I would say it depends on the client. We have done several times, so we can assist in the due diligence. We can assist to develop the roadmap. And in many cases, we have been asked to stay for the transition period for the simple reason is, as I mentioned earlier, the buyer might not have the bandwidth and the manpower capacity to go through the transition for integration and so on. So they would normally ask us to for some help to absorb this transition where the need for resources and IT skills is much higher than normal day to day. So we could assist in all three phases: the due diligence, the preparation of the roadmap, which include day one and the transition period after day one. So, or we could be there later on to assist with ERP or other apps. So we could, and we have done both. We have done work for the buyer side as well as the seller. So we have had seller also coming to us and for advice and to guide them through the journey, which is a different, obviously, perspective. In this case, the seller will want to obviously decouple their system, and they have a different perspective, but they also have a significant amount of work to go through that transaction. So we have been over the years helping buyers as well as sellers.
Okay. Here's the thing though. I've obviously talked to a lot of people at D4M, and one of the recurring themes, especially when it comes to ERP shops, more specifically SAP ERP shops, is that on the one hand, yes, priorities can shift, but on the other hand, when it comes to SAP, there is still that question of the looming deadline of 2027. Is there anything that you could tell potential VPs or directors regarding this whole concept of like cold feet when it comes to the roadmap and potential ERP rollouts? Because obviously there's a deadline looming.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we see this all the time. That's normal in the industry, and a common, scenario here is the buyers and the sellers are most of the time on a different ERP. One might be running QAD or GD AdWords, and the other one might be running SAP or vice versa. So there's maybe any combination and permutation is possible. But even though you're dealing with two companies that are both on SAP, it doesn't mean they are on the same version. One could be already on S/4HANA, and the other one could maybe still running ECC6. Or you might have even different. You might have two companies already running SAP ECC6, but one might be running an older version or a different version than the buyer. So it's very unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely that you end up with a situation where the buyer and the seller just happen to be running the exact same version of SAP. That's quite rare. And beyond that, they might have modified the software. They might be using it in a different way, as SAP is a very flexible platform that has thousands of parameters to configure. So, all in all, even if you're on the same version, it doesn't mean that you are using it and it's configured the same way. So, the long story short is there is always a context where both ERPs are different to some degree. Could be very different or less different, but it is always an important consideration. And this, to add to your point, I think as we all know, SAP will support EC6 until 2027. So when we have to deal with corporation using SAP buying other corporation on SAP, looming, I would say, above their heads is always okay. Everybody needs to be on S/4HANA by 2027. So that adds another angle to the transition plan. As far as should we, for example, when you buy a company, should everybody first be on the same release of ECC6 as a step one? We all go through a standardization to ECC6, and step two, we all go together on S/4HANA, or everything that could be in between, meaning you might decide to stop any deployment of ECC6 immediately and have everybody goes to S/4HANA, but as a two-stream type of approach. So there's many ways. I think the 2027 deadline add, I would say, a very important dimension to this.